Yes, we belong. Thank you, President Macarro, for speaking truth to power and bringing forth these vital issues to set the tone for Indian country in 2026. As Executive Director of NCAI, I look forward to continuing to work together alongside our dedicated staff to ensure our people's voices are not just heard, but they are the foundation for our collective action. Now, we will hear from Congress as Senator Tina Smith from the great state of Minnesota delivers her congressional response. Senator Smith.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to thank first President Macarro for your wise and unifying words, to Executive Director Larry Wright, and to your incredible youth leaders, Jonas and Angelina. I am United States Senator Tina Smith, and I represent the place that we now call Minnesota. Minnesota Makoche, the land where waters reflect the clouds. I am honored and humbled to be here to offer the congressional response to President Macarro's State of Indian Nations address, and I am so grateful to NCAI and to your leadership, to the tribal leaders gathered here, and to all American Indian and Alaska Natives who have traveled a great distance to be here in Washington today, especially the elders and the youth leaders, and to all who are here with us in spirit. I also want to say Han and Bonjour to Minnesota's tribal leaders who are here today, representing Minnesota's 11 sovereign tribal nations. I want to recognize in particular my friend and mentor, Lenny Feinday, who recently left the Tribal Council at Leech Lake to join NCAI as General Counsel. Lenny has been a strong and respected leader in Minnesota and around the country, so thank you, Lenny, for your friendship. In Minnesota, Native people lead, including our remarkable Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan, who I know is going to be here later today, and Shelley Buck, former leader of the Prairie Island community and newly elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives. So, friends, I want to start by acknowledging the deep challenges and attacks on our democracy we are facing in Minnesota and around the country, especially in the last month. In my home state of Minnesota, federal masked immigration police have been roving our streets, detaining, arresting, assaulting, and even killing our citizens, Alex Preddy and Renee Good. These are people who have done nothing wrong except express their constitutional rights to free speech and assembly. Tragically, this harassment and violence are as old as colonialism to Native people. Over the last weeks, countless Native folks have been stopped and questioned and even detained by immigration enforcement agents. It is cruelly ironic that Native people, the indigenous people of this land, are being accused of illegally immigrating. But what gives me hope? What gives me hope are the incredible people of Minnesota who are showing the rest of the country how to stand against this violence and how to stand strong for our shared humanity. And I see every day powerful Native organizations across the state who know how to mobilize to protect their neighbors. And it is not lost on me that Minneapolis is the birthplace of the American Indian movement, and the relatives of those leaders are organizing to protect us today. I saw this firsthand a couple of weeks ago when I stopped by Powwow Grounds Coffee, which is a coffee shop and community hub in Little Earth. I stopped by to bring donations and to check in with the Native organizers. Powwow Grounds is just down the street from the American Indian Movement building. And shortly before we pulled up, a vehicle full of ICE agents had just driven away from Powwow Grounds, driven away by the indigenous protectors who blew their whistles to sound the alarm. And this is still happening today in Minneapolis and Minnesota. And yet, the mutual aid networks through the Tawahe Foundation and others have sprung to action in support of the community. Leaders like Sean Sherman and Rachel Dion Thunder have organized public advocacy and outcry to demand justice and to tell about the impacts of Operation Metro Surge on small businesses and farmers. I am so proud of Minnesota's response to this crisis and the unity and dignity and strength that we have shown. But it weighs heavily on me how this is re-traumatizing Native people in my state. At the core of this, at the heart of this, we return to core principles and the values and obligations laid out in the Constitution of the United States: freedom for all people and the rule of law. And let me be clear, this U.S. Constitution recognizes, it does not create, it recognizes tribal nations' inherent sovereignty and the rights to govern yourselves. This sovereignty is not created by the United States or our treaties or our Constitution. It is inherent and it is fundamental. And it is the starting place for all of our mutual agreements and treaties and obligations. And it cannot be abrogated by any leader. These core principles, inherent tribal sovereignty, self-determination, and the federal government's trust and treaty obligations, these are at the core of NCAI's purpose as a unifying voice and a strong, effective advocate for American Indians and Alaska Natives and the well-being of your people. Now, in his remarks, President Macarro talked about the challenges facing tribal nations, certainly, and also about the unity that can be found in your shared commitment to defending your inherent sovereignty. You are a movement for change and empowerment, NCAI. And this is so important because even in the face of the chaos and uncertainty and upheaval in Washington over the last year, tribal issues remain a source of common ground. Now, don't get me wrong. This has been an incredibly difficult year. So many of the federal government's commitments to you for government-to-government consultation, grants and agreements to fulfill commitments for your health and your housing and your education, land and water rights, all of this and more has been caught up in a cycle of destructive uncertainty, and this is unacceptable. And yet, tribal sovereignty is not a partisan issue. The coalition of leaders in Washington who understand tribal sovereignty is diverse. It stretches across ideological and political spectrums. These are not Democratic or Republican issues. And yet we also must be honest with ourselves. Both parties have failed historically and to this day to live up to these responsibilities. And still, being an optimist, we can celebrate the successes and the progress that we have made. Between 2021 and 2025, we saw historic empowerment of Native people to lead federal agencies and departments, including Deb Haaland as Secretary of the Interior. We saw historic investments in Native enterprises and communities, from energy and housing and education. And we brought Leonard Peltier home. When Native people lead, Native people do better. And we need to remain grounded in the vision of what is possible when the federal government truly and finally meets its trust and treaty obligations. A fully funded Indian health service with culturally competent care to keep your members healthier in body and in spirit. Safe, stable, and available housing for everyone in tribal communities. Language revitalization and education about Native histories and cultures for Native students, but for non-Native students as well. Access to Indigenous food, public safety to keep your community safe, and the jurisdiction to enforce your sovereignty on your lands. Economic opportunity and innovation and investment. And to be clear, tribes should not be forced into a competition with one another for scarce resources. It is not an option, this funding. This funding is a manifestation of our promises and obligations. So, yes, there is a lot of work to do, especially to rise above this partisan division that is gripping and ripping our country apart. So, I'd like to close by highlighting something that I feel so strongly about. And I want to say, though I'm retiring from the Senate at the end of this year, I am not done working for you, for my state, for my country. I am so proud of the work that we have done together, and so grateful and humbled by the friendship and the understanding and the wisdom that you have shared with me, starting when I never dreamed that I would be a United States Senator. Some of you may know that I am a senator from Minnesota, but I was born in New Mexico. And as a young girl, I was blessed to grow up surrounded by Pueblo land and food and culture. When I moved to Minnesota, I was young, I was newly married, and I was just starting out, and I had so much to learn about Minnesota. And as senator in Minnesota, the relationships that I have built with Minnesota's 11 sovereign nations are precious to me. They feel like a sacred trust. And I've probably never been more honored than when Minnesota's tribal leaders traveled to Minnesota for a flag ceremony, giving me permission to display your nation's flags in my office here in Washington, D.C. We have done some great work together. We restored tribal criminal jurisdiction in the Violence Against Women Act so that you can protect your communities. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, we delivered the largest infusion of funding to tribal nations in our history because you know best what your tribe needs and how to protect and care for your communities. We secured advanced appropriations for Indian Health Service. Federal government dysfunction and disruption should not interfere with your capacity to take care of your people. We protected native foods like minoman, pusin, wild rice, and invested in language revitalization. And we have seen the federal government come to tribes to manage forests cooperatively using indigenous forestry methods. And we have restored land, including 11,000 acres to the Leech Lake Band, righting historic wrongs. So, on a sunny and unseasonably cool day in July of 2024, I was invited to Leech Lake to commemorate the restoration of these lands to the band. It was a serious and beautiful ceremony and a powerful reminder that it is never too late. It is never too late to right historic wrongs. I have seen so many examples in my time in service of Native power and strength and resilience, whether it is Native entrepreneurs and small businesses, whether it is language immersion schools and childcare facilities where Native kids can learn their languages and connect to their cultures from the very beginning. And I am so grateful to see the record number of Native people elected to state legislators all around the country. And my dream is that someday, before too long, we will see another Native person in the United States Senate. We have so much to do, so much work to do, and in my last year in the Senate, I will work as hard as I can on food sovereignty and the Farm Bill to pass the PROTECT Act and to address the critical housing shortage in Native communities. And I will push relentlessly the federal government to uphold its trust and treaty obligations and to meet those obligations and to honor your sovereignty. This is my constitutional responsibility. And NCAI, I am not done making good trouble. I want to end by thanking you so much for inviting me to speak with you this morning. And I want to close by saying that your presence is so important. Your voices are so powerful, and we need to hear them right now in Washington, D.C., because power comes from the people to Washington. It does not come from Washington. Washington is a place where too often you hear the words, "we can't." What we should be hearing is how and when. We need to have courage and determination in this moment. We need to stay connected to the eternal force for good, which fuels us all. Robin Wall Kimmerer, member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, who wrote the brilliant Braiding Sweetgrass, told us what to do. She said, "I want to stand by the river in my finest dress. I want to sing strong and hard and stomp my feet with 100 others so that the waters hum with our happiness. I went to dance for the renewal of the world. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and for being here to educate and to advocate and to organize for your communities. Miigwech Padamayaye.